This is the brain scan of professional wrestler Chris Benoit. Police allege Benoit murdered his wife Nancy on Friday, June 22nd in their home. Then in another horrible act of cruelty, the next day he turned on his son. He strangled 7-year-old Daniel. The following day, Benoit hanged himself in his weight room. His friends and family say this is not the Chris Benoit they knew. A forensic study was recently performed on Benoit's brain, and the findings, they're out. Cary Ichter, the lawyer for Chris Benoit's father, Michael, joins us live in New York. Cary, how did this happen to be done, the study of Chris Benoit's brain?
Well, the Sports Legacy Institute contacted Mr. Benoit soon after this tragedy and asked him for samples of brain tissue so that this analysis could be conducted.
Do you know, or does your client know, how many times he may have had a concussion?
As I understand it, Chris told his father that he had had so many concussions over the course of his career as a professional wrestler that he had lost count of them.
What do you know about the Sports Legacy Institute?
It's a nonprofit organization that has been formed for the purpose of studying these kinds of problems that arise in professional athletes as a consequence of head trauma.
I'm not going to put you on the spot. You're not a doctor, and Dr. Bottom will be joining us soon, but I'm just curious, in layperson's term, what have you been told about the analysis done on Chris Benoit's brain?
Well, the analysis has disclosed that Chris's brain had extensive and what has been described as stunning and remarkable injuries to it that can be tracked back to the trauma that he sustained in the ring as a professional wrestler.
And this would expand what period of time? Obviously, his death was in June, but going back about how far?
Well, it's hard to say, but we do know this. We know that over the course of the past several years, professional wrestling has become increasingly reckless in its approach to the treatment of wrestlers in the ring, introducing things like steel chairs, tables, ladders, and those sort of things.
Well, WWE says that it looked through its records and it had no records, at least I think I'm correct in saying this, of Chris Benoit having a concussion. Did you see a statement by WWE, or have you been in touch with them? What have they said about this?
Well, that's what I understand that they said, and frankly, I'm stunned by that, because if any sort of employer had a credible head injury program to deal with the kinds of trauma that these athletes experience in the ring, you would think that they would go out of their way to make sure that they evaluate these people on a regular basis.
Did Michael Benoit say that over the 6 months preceding his son's death that he ever saw any sort of bizarre or unusual behavior?
Michael didn't, but Michael lives 4,000 miles away from where Chris lived. Other people who had daily encounters with Chris, his neighbors, his colleagues, were beginning to see increasingly bizarre and aberrational conduct on Chris's part.
And in what way? How did it manifest itself?
Acts of paranoia, hyper-religiosity, his unwillingness to let his family venture outside of the home. Those kinds of things were going on a regular basis.
I picked 6 months. Does it go back farther than that? That was just an arbitrary date I picked.
Well, I understand in 2005, soon after Eddie Guerrero died, who was Chris's best friend in the ring, Chris began to keep a diary in which he began to express profound depression and views that were just not normal.
Cary, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden joins us in New York. Dr. Baden,
hi, Greta.
Hi. What have you looked at, and what have you determined?
Well, in reading over the records, first we should thank Benoit's dad for allowing this study, because it can do a lot to understand brain damage in contact sports. We've known this since the 20s in boxing, the punch-drunk syndrome. In fact, we have a CAT scans on that right there. On the left is a normal brain, a CAT scan. On the right is a boxer's brain, 29-year-old, who's had many episodes of head trauma. The white areas are damaged and non-functioning areas. And when you get enough of this, the person is obviously punch-drunk, forgetful, weak, loopy in appearance.
How about homicidal?
No, not homicidal. Depressed, suicidal, perhaps. But what Benoit's brain is described, and what you showed first were the pathological findings, what the brain looked under the microscope in the first films that you showed, shows high magnification, showing a lot of that black material is damaged neurons and damaged brain. And what has to be done is to correlate what was present at autopsy with what you asked. What was his condition during the last couple of years of his life? Clearly, he suffered many different kinds of brain damage. Brain damage from falling back on his head, which is the front part of the brain, and damage on the top and side of the heads, which could be from chairs and, you know, all the tricks they do.
Can you predict or say to a medical certainty, okay, if someone has those type of injuries, someday someone might like wake up and kill his wife and his son, or is that just too spectacular?
That's too speculative.
You can't say anything like that.
No, we have, in the studies that this group has done, 20%, they point out 20% of professional boxers. See, boxing, you intend to cause brain damage. That's what I don't like about boxing as a physician. You want to knock somebody out for 10 seconds. You want to give them brain concussions, and that causes a lot of brain damage. In wrestling, they shouldn't do that, but every time you see a boxer hit on the head with something or falling back and hits his head, he's losing brain cells, and this will be an excellent opportunity to correlate what happened to Benoit with a long history now of how he reacted. Was he getting more paranoid? Was he getting bizarre behavior changes that can be correlated with what you're seeing on the microscopic sections?
Dr. Biden, as always, thank you, sir.
Thank you.